Ladies and gentlemen, I want to speak today to the brokenhearted, to the woman who's been hurt. Maybe you were betrayed. Maybe you were left. Maybe you were abused, forgotten, or silenced. But I'm here to tell you something. God has not forgotten you. And if you've been through pain, through loss, through abandonment, there are signs that the hand of God is still on your life. The pain might have come from people, but the healing will come from the Lord. And if you open your eyes, you will begin to see that even now, God is blessing you. There are moments in life when it becomes so deep it finds no words. A woman who has been hurt knows what it feels like to cry silently in the night, where no one sees, no one understands, and the weight of sorrow seems too heavy to carry. But what she may not know in that moment is that God has been watching all along. He has not turned his face away. In fact, the Bible says something so tender, so personal, it reaches right into the core of our pain. But Psalm 5:6-8 tells us, "You keep track of all my sorrows. You have collected all my tears in your bottle. You have recorded each one in your book." That means every tear that fell down your face, every cry you whispered into a pillow, every ache that clenched your chest. God saw it and he took note. He was not distant. He was not indifferent. He was right there, bottling each tear as if it were a priceless treasure. To the world, tears might seem weak. To people, pain might look like failure. But to God, your tears are sacred. They are evidence of a heart that feels deeply, that has been broken, but still turns toward him. And when you bring your pain to God, when your tears fall at his feet, they become prayers, not always with words, but with a language that only heaven understands. There are moments when your soul cries louder than your voice ever could, and God hears that. He responds to the language of the brokenhearted. Pain has a way of driving us either away from God or into his arms. And when a woman chooses to let her hurt lead her into prayer, into communion with the Father, something powerful begins to shift. Tears become seeds. They become the raw material God uses to birth strength, character, and purpose. He does not waste them. He never says, "That's enough, stop crying." He invites every tear because he knows each one is connected to a deep place in your heart. And it's in that deep place that he does his greatest work. Think of the woman in the Gospels who wept at the feet of Jesus, washing them with her tears and wiping them with her hair. She was not ashamed to pour her pain before him. And Jesus didn't rebuke her. He welcomed her. He defended her. He blessed her. That is what God does with a hurting woman who brings her sorrow to him. He doesn't just notice her. He lifts her. He honors her faith. He transforms her from a weeping woman to a walking testimony of his love and restoration. When you cry out to God in your pain, you're not being weak, you're being honest. And God responds to honesty. He responds to the cry of the soul more than the eloquence of the mouth. He listens for the heart behind the words. And when your heart is breaking, his heart is moved. The blessing is not just that he hears you. It's that he is already working behind the scenes, turning your mourning into dancing, ashes into beauty. Sometimes mistake the silence of God for absence. But silence is not absence. While you were crying, God was already preparing the next chapter. While you were sobbing, he was stitching together the pieces of your broken heart. And each tear that fell became part of your healing. They became holy. They became sacred expressions of faith because you didn't run from God. You ran to Him. And something even more mysterious begins to happen. Over time, those tears that once fell in agony become reminders of how far God has brought you. You begin to see that each tear was matched by a moment of grace. Each cry became a turning point in your soul's journey. The strength you now carry did not come from comfort. It came from communion with God in your most broken state. What looked like weakness was actually the soil in which God planted endurance, wisdom, compassion, and faith. You didn't just survive the storm. You prayed through it. You wept your way into healing. You discovered a God who doesn't just sit on a throne in heaven, but sits beside you on the floor where the tears fall. That's how personal He is. That's how much He loves you. And the very act of crying out to Him has become one of the clearest signs that His blessing is already resting on you. When a woman has been hurt, betrayed, or left behind, she stands at a crossroads in her spirit. One path leads to bitterness, a slow-burning fire that hardens the heart, poisons relationships, and clouds the future. The other leads to strength, not the kind the world celebrates with loud pride, but a quiet grace, holy strength built in the trenches of pain, molded by the hands of God Himself. One of the clearest signs that God is blessing a woman who has been hurt is that she did not allow her pain to define her. She allowed it to refine her. Bitterness is easy. It comes naturally when life breaks your heart. When someone lies to you, leaves you, or wounds you with words they can never take back, bitterness rises like a wall meant to protect. But it doesn't protect. It isolates, doesn't heal. It hardens. Yet the woman who chooses to forgive, who chooses to release the offense, not weak, she is walking in supernatural strength. That kind of forgiveness is not something we conjure up on our own. It is evidence that the of God is working within. It's a divine mark of blessing. Romans 8:28 says, "And we know that in all things God works for the good of those who love Him." That means all things, not just the good memories, not just the answered prayers, even the heartbreak, even the betrayal, even the season where you cried yourself to sleep and asked God why. Even that moment where you felt abandoned by people you loved and trusted. God does not cause all things, but He can use all things. And when a woman chooses not to let her pain turn her into someone bitter, but into someone better, she is partnering with God in her healing. She's letting Him use the very thing that was meant to destroy her to build her into someone stronger than she ever imagined. There is something incredibly powerful about the woman who walks through fire and comes out not smelling like smoke. She has battle scars, but she also carries wisdom. She no longer reacts out of woundedness, but responds with discernment. She's not a victim of her past. She's a vessel of purpose. That is a work only God can do. Pain alone doesn't produce strength. A pain surrendered to God does. The world will try to tell a woman who's been hurt to get even, to lash out, to protect herself by closing off her heart. But the woman under the blessing of God chooses a different way. She walks in love even when she's been unloved. She shows mercy even when none was shown to her. Grace, she keeps her heart soft in a world that's tried to harden it. That's not natural. That's divine. That's a sign that God's hand is on her. She may still feel the ache. Healing isn't forgetting, remembering and choosing peace anyway. It's waking up with memories that used to bring tears and now bring testimony. It's looking back at a season that nearly broke her and realizing she's still standing, still worshiping, still trusting. And in that moment, she sees that the strength she carries now was forged in the furnace of sorrow. God was with her when the pain first hit, and he never left. Through every phase, shock, grief, rage, silence, surrender, he was shaping her into a woman who would not just survive, but shine. Bitterness would have made her cold. Strength made her compassionate. Bitterness would have made her blind. Strength opened her eyes to see people through mercy. Bitterness would have kept her stuck. Strength moved her forward into purpose. There is no greater beauty than a woman who could have become hateful, but chose to become holy. No greater testimony than a woman who could have turned her back on love, but kept her heart open, trusting that God would protect what she could not. The blessing of God does not always show up in riches or ease or applause. Sometimes it shows up in the form of a woman who no longer cries the same tears, who has learned to breathe again, grace, who carries herself with quiet dignity because she knows what it costs to forgive. She knows the weight of carrying anger, and she laid it down, not because it didn't hurt, but because she was never meant to carry it forever. She handed it to God, and he exchanged her bitterness for peace. He traded her brokenness for strength. And now, when people look at her, they see someone changed, not by pain alone, but by the grace that met her in it. When a woman has been wounded, isolated, or abandoned, the aftermath often feels lonelier than the pain itself. It's not just what was done to her. It's who walked away, who didn't stand by her, who turned silent in the moments she needed the most support. But one of the ways God begins to show his blessing in the life of a woman who has been hurt is by carefully, gently, and divinely rearranging the relationships around her. He removes what was toxic. He shifts what was unstable. And he begins to introduce voices that reflect his love, not her pain. This is not always immediate, and often feels like a stripping at first. People start to fall away, some naturally, some abruptly. And the woman begins to wonder if she's becoming too much, too complicated, too broken. But in reality, this is not rejection, it's protection. God is pruning the branches that no longer bear fruit, the ones that were draining her instead of nourishing her. He's making room for something better. When God is blessing a woman, he does not let just anyone walk with her into her healing. He carefully selects the ones who will walk with her in truth, not in gossip. In grace, not in judgment. In silence, if needed, but always in love. God is intentional with relationships. He knows that who surrounds you shapes you. He understands that when a woman is vulnerable from past wounds, the people she listens to can either bring her closer to restoration or pull her back into cycles of bitterness and fear. So when God begins to bless her, he begins to align her with people who speak life, not death. People who pray with her, not prey on her. People who don't compete with her, but celebrate her becoming. Sometimes he sends a mentor, someone who's been through the fire and has the wisdom of battle, tested faith. Other times, he sends a friend who listens without fixing, who sits without judging, who encourages without pushing. He may even send someone unexpected, someone who shows her what unconditional support really looks like. These divine connections are more than just companions. They are carriers of God's love. Their presence in her life is proof that she is not forgotten, that God has not only seen her pain, but has also appointed people to help her rise from it. Proverbs 2:17 says, "As iron sharpens iron, so one person sharpens another." When God starts blessing a woman, He doesn't just send comfort. He sends sharpening. He brings people who challenge her to grow, who remind of her worth, who won't let her stay in the shadows of her past. These are the ones who refuse to define her by her wounds, but see her potential through God's eyes. They sharpen her gifts, encourage her dreams, and hold her accountable to the calling on her life. There may have been a time when she surrounded herself with people just to avoid feeling alone, even if those people weren't good for her soul. But as the blessing of God increases, her discernment increases too. She starts to recognize who brings peace and who brings confusion. She begins to see that not everyone deserves access to her heart. And this isn't pride, it's protection, it's wisdom learned through pain and guided by the Spirit. When she no longer feels the need to chase unhealthy approval, that's a sign that God has done a deep work within. She may still feel the ache of those who left. She may still have moments of missing what was familiar, even if it was harmful. But in those quiet moments, she will start to notice something new. She's not as lonely as she once was. There's someone texting her a verse when she needs it. Someone checking in without an agenda. Someone standing with her, not because they need something, but because they were sent. That's God showing her His faithfulness through human hands. That's God rebuilding her circle with purpose. It's not just about having more friends. It's about having the right ones. Ones who reflect His character. Ones who point her back to the truth when lies try to creep in. Ones who don't need the full story to stand beside her in prayer. Ones who see her not just as she is, but as she is becoming. That's what divine friendship looks like. That's what blessing looks like. And that's how God begins to show a woman that though she once hurt, she is now being